All right, last page of the study guide. Let's get through these last couple problems. Problem number 6, the graph of logarithmic function is shown. Graph and label the function k of x is equal to, okay. So I want to identify my transformation. So I've got a +7 here, and separately I have a +3 here. So those two transformations. The +7 is directly attached to x, so that means it's going to be a horizontal translation. And it's kind of opposite what you think it would be. That's actually going to be left 7. And the +3 at the end of the function, so it's f of x, and then you've got the +3. That's going to be a vertical translation. And that's going to be up 3 units. So when I look at my graph, these 3 points, right, each of these 3 little points, I'm going to move up 3, left 7, or left 7, up 3. It doesn't matter which way you count it, as long as you do both. So let's go left 7 here. So left 7, up 3, left 7, up 3. And this is always the tricky one with these. So when you move left 7 and up 3, do not put it on the grid line. Okay, it's off the grid line a little bit. Now I'm going to remind you, and I did this in the last problem when we had the logarithmic function as well. In the original logarithmic function, there is a horizontal asymptote right here on y equals. Okay, the y-axis. It's x equals 0. I'm going to move this, so I'm going to loop it and move it left 7 units. The reason I'm going to do this, again, is it's going to help me when I go to draw my curve here, the transformed function. I want to make sure that I don't cross this vertical line. So when I draw through these, I don't want to end up over here. All right, so I'm going to use this as a guideline. That's what an asymptote is. It's a guideline for you. So we're going to curve up and to the right. And as I curve to the, I move to the left here, I really can't go far, but I can go down. And I did realize one thing I forgot to do because I didn't read the directions that carefully. You are supposed to label this, so this is k of x. See, it is a good habit to actually, well, read the directions, but also label your graphs. All right, so graph it, label it, describe it. Okay, so problem number 6 is done. Let's slide on down to number 7. All right, solve each equation using any methods. So I'm going to zoom in on part A here. Part A, I am going to solve by factoring. All right, so I am going to factor out a 2 and an x from both terms. So x squared minus 25 is equal to 0. I'm going to further factor x squared minus 25 is x minus 5 and x plus 5. The order on those two does not matter. And now I'm going to take each factor and set it equal to 0. Once I've got the factors equal to 0, I can solve them, and I'll get the answers for x. So divide by 2 here, I get x equals 0. Add 5 here, I'm going to get x equals, I don't need to put another x equals, so I'm just going to put 5 here. And if I subtract 5, I would get x equals -5 there. So those 3 answers are the answers to part A. So part A is now done. I'm going to go ahead and slide over to part B, and let's take a look at what that one has to offer. Part B is already partially factored for us. So you can either continue to factor from here, or I'm going to remind you how to solve these using square roots. So I'm going to set each factor equal to 0. So x squared minus 9 equals 0. Forgot the equal to 0 here. All right. In this first equation, I'm going to add 49 to both sides. So I would have x squared is equal to 49. I'm not a huge fan of the squared part here, so I'm going to go ahead and take the square root of both sides. Now, when we put the square root in the problem, we need to put a plus minus in, and the square root of 49 is 7. So that takes us through the first one. We have another equation just like it. I can add 9 to both sides. So x squared equals 9. I'm going to take the square root of both sides there, and I would get x equals, we put the square root in, so plus or minus, square root of 9 is 3. All right, so technically part B has 4 answers to it. Positive 7's one answer, negative 7's one answer, positive 3, and negative 3. So a total of 4 answers there for part B. But part B is now done. I'm going to go ahead and slide over to part C here. This is a little reminder about the radical functions that we did in the last unit. So first thing I want to do is find my radical. And my radical is right here. And I went a little bit hard on that graphing, or the shading here, so let me stop that. There we go. Now, unfortunately, that radical is not by itself, so I want to get it by itself. So I'm going to go ahead and add x to both sides. So that's going to be the square root of 6x minus 5 is equal to x. The inverse operation to a square root is to square both sides. So square and square root cancel. You've got 6x minus 5 equals x squared. Now we have a quadratic equation, and I want to get all of the pieces to one side. Now, I know it seems a little bit weird, but I'm actually going to take the 2 pieces on the left and move them to the right side simply because it keeps the x squared positive. So minus 6x plus 5 minus 6x plus 5. So 0 equals x squared minus 6x plus 5. This is factorable. So what multiplies to positive 5 and adds up to negative 6? That is not the right number. That's going to be negative 5 and negative 1. Helps if my brain is turned on and doing the right things here. All right. So now that I have it in factored form, I'm going to set each factor equal to 0. So x minus 5 equals 0. And separately, I'm going to do x minus 1 equals 0. So that's going to get me 2 possible answers here. I've got x equals positive 5, and I've got x equals 1. Now, the reminder for you with these problems is you have to check your work. If you do not check your work, I will take points off for it because you have not shown me that your answers are correct. Okay. Now, it might seem redundant sometimes to check your work if everything is okay, but the only way you're going to know if both of your answers, we've got 2 answers here, the only way we know if both of these answers are right is if we check it. Now, the check is not difficult. Okay, so I'm going to do check down here. And the first one I'm going to do is I'm going to check x equals 5. So back in the original problem, everywhere I have an x, I'm going to replace it with the number 5. So 6 times 5 minus 5 minus 5 is equal to 0. If you can do this in your head, awesome. If you need a calculator, grab a calculator. So I'm going to actually go ahead and pop up, I'll use Calculate 84 because it's on my screen here. Let it load up. All right, so clear out all the mess I've got in there right now. Clear. Okay. So I'm going to put this whole left side of the problem in the calculator. So square root 6 times 5 minus 5. Now to get out of the square root here, I'm just going to arrow to the right and then do another minus 5. Okay, so make sure your root ends before you put this other minus 5 in. Hit enter. And I get the statement 0 equals 0. That is 100% true, which means yes, x equals 5. That does not have any bearing on if x equals 1 or not. Okay, you have to check your answers. So separately now, I'm going to do the exact same work, but this time, everywhere I have an x, I'm going to replace it with a 1. Now, let me make sure I wrote that correctly because I kind of forgot the original problem. 6x minus 5 minus... Okay, yeah, I'm good. All right. So again, I'm going to do this whole left side into the calculator. So square root 6 times 1. And again, if you can do this in your head, awesome. Do it in your head. I don't know why I just put a plus sign. So let's delete that. Minus 1. All right, so 0 equals 0. That is also a true statement, which means for this particular problem, both answers worked. Okay, that doesn't always happen. In fact, most of the time you'd have one answer that gets thrown out. So for part C, we have two answers here, x equals 5 and x equals 1. You've got to show me your check. All right, I'm going to slide over to part D, and that will be the last problem for this study guide. I'm going to leave Calculate 84 up and open because eventually I'll need to check my work again. All right, so problem part D, I'm going to find the radical. Right here is my radical. And I want to get it isolated. So I need to add 9 to get rid of that. So I'm going to add 9 to both sides. So square root of negative x plus 6 is equal to x plus 6. The inverse operation to a square root is to square both sides. So square and square root cancel. Negative x plus 6 equals. Now, if it helps you, off to the side, write out what x plus 6 squared is. So remember, to square something means you are multiplying whatever that something is times itself. So you're going to do x times x, x times 6, 6 times x, and 6 times 6. Combine some like terms in the middle here. And what we end up with, let me try this again. I'm going to loop this and just copy it because that goes right there. Okay. So x plus 6 squared turns into x squared plus 12x plus 36. Now, in the same way, I've got a quadratic here, just like the last problem. I'm going to move these two terms from the left side to the right side. So I'm going to add an x and subtract a 6. Add an x, subtract a 6. So those both cancel out, right? They subtract or add to zeros. So now I've got x squared plus 13x plus 30. That is factorable. So what multiplies to 30 and adds to 13? Well, positive 10 plus 3. Yep, good answers. I'm going to take each factor, set it equal to 0. It helps if I actually put, whoa, hold on. I put zeros in the wrong place for that problem. All right, x plus 3 equals 0. So we've got this first one. If we subtract 10 from both sides, we would get x equals negative 10 as a possibility. If we subtract 3 from both sides, we're going to get x equals negative 3 as a possibility. Now, just because the last problem had two answers that worked, I have no idea if these answers, neither one of them could work for all I know. All right. But what you're going to do is check your work. All right. So down here at the bottom, I'm going to write check. Okay. Because I want to show that I'm checking my work. And in this original problem, everywhere I have an x, I'm going to replace it with a negative 10 for my first check. So square root of negative 10, if you wanted to, if you know that that equals just positive 10, flip it in there. Plus 6 minus 9 equals negative 10, minus 3. Okay, so I'm going to put this whole left side in my calculator. So square root of negative 10, I think that'll work, plus 6 minus 9 equals negative 5. All right, so I get negative 5 here equals negative 10 minus 3 equals negative 13. Well, no, that's not true. All right, that is a false statement. Negative 5 does not equal negative 13. So that means that negative 10 is not a possible solution for me. That has nothing, I have no idea how that affects, or that has no effect on my other answer, but I'm going to check my other answer here, which is x equals negative 3. So I've got the square root of negative 3 plus 6 minus 9 equals negative 3 minus 3. So this whole left side, I'm going to pop into the calculator. So square root of negative, you can use the parentheses if you want to. It might help so you can see the negative signs between them. Then minus 9, and that's going to be negative 6. And then on the right side, I have negative 3 minus 3, which is also negative 6. That's a true statement, okay? Because this is true, that tells me that this answer of x equals negative 3 is actually an answer to the problem. In fact, it's the only answer to the problem. So when you're solving these radical equations, it is entirely possible, like the work is pretty similar that we did, right? We got a quadratic, eventually we factored it, 2 answers, quadratic factored 2 answers. In part C, both answers work. In part D, only one answer works. And I could give you a third problem just like these, get a quadratic, solve it for 2 answers, and neither one could work. So just be aware of that when you're solving these, that you have to check every single problem, every single answer, okay? All right, so that takes us through the end of, that's the end of the study guide. So let me know if you have any questions or concerns as you are getting ready for this Unit 7 test.